Hello and welcome to the Patty Pod Season 3, Episode 9. Coming to you live from the living room. It is 11:37 on Saturday night, April 5th. Saturday, my favorite day. What can I say? I love the weekend, evenings and weekends. I'm working on trying to love my work life a little bit more. But it's still kind of in this first year transition mode, which has been a little bit difficult. And the phrase "one day at a time" that is popular in recovery circles has been bouncing around my consciousness quite frequently in the last few months. It seems to be coming from a good, calm place, a divine place even, and it's soothing. And I don't even have to try to invoke it. It sort of finds its way to me. So it's one day at a time in that world, but, you know, all things considered, really not the worst place or not the worst situation. There are worse things. As I mentioned to some friends on Friday night, I got back to hockey this week. I was injured. I injured my foot, as I did last year around this time exactly. Sometime in March, I believe it was. I broke my foot last year, I believe, blocking a shot. I got hit in the foot blocking a shot, which I maybe shouldn't have done. The fella who shot it, he's got a real hard shot, and he and I are very competitive, and he gets frustrated sometimes when certain players clog the middle of the ice, and I think it's a legitimate play. We've had some spirited debates about that. And anyway, he was frustrated, and he rifles the puck extra hard when he's frustrated. And in my pig-headedness, perhaps, decided I was going to block that hard shot and stuck my foot up. And I think I broke it. I'll say I think I broke it because I called my brother, who's a medical device executive, married to a foot and ankle surgeon, and described what had happened right after it happened. And I told him I could walk on it, and it was sore, and I got off the rink, but I can walk on it. I could walk on it, and he said, well, as long as it keeps getting better, you don't have to go in to the doctor. And it was getting better gradually, but it took 7 weeks before I could play again, so that made me think it was, in fact, a break. This time, I stumbled on a weird median in a dark parking lot that was poorly lit. It was a weird median that I thought had a normal curb, and I went to step down, and I think my brain thought I was going to hit a flat surface, and it was an angled surface, and my ankle rolled underneath my foot rolled underneath my leg, and my ankle rolled, I guess is how you say that, and I had my big heavy hockey bag, and really crunched down, so that was unfortunate. I was on crutches for a couple weeks, but I was quite pleased to hear the foot specialist tell me that I didn't break it after the urgent care doctor and radiologist told me that I had broken it. So I was pleased to hear that. And I was only away from the game for 4 weeks as opposed to probably maybe 6 if there was a break. So I was back at it Friday night. It felt fantastic. I did feel a little bit sluggish, but the guys told me I looked pretty good. So I was happy with that. It was fun to play. Get back out there. It's just like it's like what's the word? A joy bath that I take. I'm mixing metaphors a little bit because it feels like the week can feel like swimming through very choppy seas, and then I get to some kind of a rock or a stone or sort of. I think I have this metaphor in my head because in Duluth, in Lake Superior, there was a popular swimming spot out on the east side of town, just off the London Road, which fronts the water then on the north shore of Lake Superior. And there was a spot on 42nd Street where you could park your car in between these two homes and walk this path in between these two properties. It was probably on somebody's property, but they were quite sporting and civic-minded and let anybody just walk down their yard. And there was a little place, you walk down to the sort of little rocky beach, and there was this huge rock out probably like a 5-minute swim from the shore, And many young people, including myself and my friends, used to go almost on a dare and swim out there. It was sort of like a dare because Lake Superior temperatures were bitterly cold, even in the summer months. And so we'd build a fire, and often in the evening, and then we'd get all warm by the fire, and then we'd work up the gumption to jump in and swim out, and then you'd go out to this rock, and you'd pull yourself up, and then you'd be on the rock, and the sun would be up still, and you'd warm by the sun until you got the gumption to jump back in and swim back. Anyway, that can feel like the work week, like I'm jumping into the freezing cold and choppy seas and just battling like hell to get to that rock of the weekend and pull myself up and catch my breath again. So a big part of that is Friday night hockey with my friends. I've made this new group of friends, somewhat new. It's been about 4 or 5 years. The BDs, I call them. That stands for the Brooklyn Dads. Almost all of them are dads. Most of them, their children are like late high school, early college years, and that's how they met. Their kids were playing hockey together. And one of the dads kind of rallied the troops and got some of the other guys to start who had not, some of them had never played. So I always think and my hat's off to them for trying such a difficult sport at a later stage. It's, you have to do everything on skates. And if you're not someone who's skated a bunch as a kid, it's much harder than trying to learn basketball or pickleball or something like that. So in any case, I love that ritual is really what it is for me. As much of it, the whole evening is a ritual. I always get a ride. Since Kate and I don't have a car, and the place that we play is directly opposite from Manhattan, so there's really no public transport option. Somebody has to come scoop me, and so part of the experience is just the ride down with whomever's driving me. It's usually my neighbor, but oftentimes it's somebody else. And then hanging out in the locker room before and after, shooting the shit, talking on the bench, joking around. It's competitive, but everything's kind of tongue-in-cheek. Nobody takes it too seriously, even though we all kind of go like hell. It's this like perfect balance of competitiveness and, laid-back vibes. And then we go to the bar afterwards. We have a bar, kind of reminds me of this phrase the people in the British Isles and Ireland use. Just sidebar, I think that Ireland may be considered technically a part of the British Isles. That would be to their horror to have that word British associated with their land, but I think I've looked that up once. Sidebar to the sidebar, my brother Nick is an Irish nationalist and identifies more with the Irish maybe than his Americanness. That might not be true, but it's close. I always, I get kind of a kick out of it because he sort of hates the English as a part of that. And, we're in 8th English, I think it is, something like that. And so I always kind of give him shit about that because, he's got to hate himself a little bit if he's going to hate the English. And I do sometimes in my more serious moments try to make a point about getting away from tribalism, but it's a larger issue, and we try to keep politics out of the patty pod as they are permeating so many other places. How's that for alliteration? Mrs. Peterson, 10th grade English teacher. Okay, so back to the lecture at hand. I'll come back from the sidebar to the sidebar. Yes, I'm now I lost my train of thought a little bit, but we are Friday nights are a great time, and I was back at it with the boys, and so I had a great time. Oh yeah, the people in the UK and in Ireland use the term the local to refer to their bar, and many of them have like a very designated local, and they have a whole like kind of serious or intimate or I don't know what the phrase would be, but it's a very big part of their lives. It's like, definitely this. I think some marketing or business people have called it the third the third space. It's not your home and not your work, and how important that can be. And I can understand that totally. So we go to a place in Park Slope every Friday, and we, of course, know the bartenders quite well. My friends actually knew this bartender, one of them, before when she was at a different bar, and we kind of followed her to this new bar. I like the place. It's a little bit upscale. It's not super expensive or anything. It's just, they have like woodwork and nice lighting, and it's kind of got a mid or pre-war, kind of look to it without trying to look in any kind of, it's not a particular, design. It just looks pre-war, and I like it. Anyway, I think there's woodwork throughout and tile floors, and yeah, it's kind of got this classic Irish bar look. So we go there and then shoot the shit some more. As you can imagine, from a guy who talks on a podcast for 2.5 seasons, I like to shoot the shit. I also wolf down some Cajun fries and have a seltzer. It's a good time. And so we did that, and it's just it's such a great start to the weekend. It feels like the weekend extends greatly. I'm sometimes surprised on Saturday night that I have a whole nother day, because we've had a long, great, fun night and then just chilled all day. Today, this episode is called the Smorgasbord because I had to travel to Williamsburg. I had kind of a delightfully surprising day, maybe a surprisingly delightful day is the better way to phrase that. I woke up and rain was in the forecast. I was supposed to take my niece to her softball game, but I did not get the chance because of the rain, and I was disappointed because I was looking forward to seeing her. She's in the 6th grade now, and we just don't spend as much time as we used to. When she was younger, me and Kate would go to her house, which is only a 10-minute walk, which is wonderful. More frequently, her parents would come into town. Kate's parents would come into town more, and we'd all be over there on Sundays more frequently. But the kids got busy as elementary school kids do, with birthday parties and basketball and softball and baseball and taekwondo and or rather jujitsu. My mistake. Don't at me. Sadie and Dylan don't listen, but don't at me, Joanna, if you listen to this episode. In any case, so I was looking forward to seeing her and watching her play, but I get to see her, I think, tomorrow. I think we're celebrating Passover tomorrow, so all's well that ends well. So in any case, kind of didn't know what to do. I'm always kind of groggy on a Saturday morning because it's a late night on Friday night. I usually don't get to bed till 1. And we did sleep in a little bit. And then I always make a big breakfast. It's the only time I cook. I make my own home fries and eggs over easy. And I make Kate some scrambled eggs. And I know that's quite simple, all of those things. But it's like barely recognized as cooking, maybe. But I do them well. I will say that. And I'm a fan of diners and a kind of a harsh critic of food purveyors in general. But one of my disappointments of being in the New York City area is the lack of good diners. This, in my mind, was going to be kind of ground central of, really, really good diners. Like, you couldn't make it in New York City if you weren't good, is sort of the thinking, like the rents are too high and whatnot. Like, and it's not that hard to make a good cheeseburger and a good omelet, right? You would think. But I've been disappointed time and time again. They don't do hash browns out here. They do home fries, which are essentially just like diced potatoes that are roasted. And it can be a little tricky to get the seasoning proper every time, an even amount, without under seasoning or over seasoning. But I don't know. I've got it down now. My stuff's as good as anybody's. So that's a weekend tradition. Saturday morning and Sunday morning. Did do that. And then I had to deal with the e-bike. I think I've talked about the e-bike before. That was a game changer for me. I bought an e-bike last summer. I bought a big one, the kind that you may see people hauling little children on. Mine has this long rack kind of on the back, and you can put a seat on it. I got that so that Kate could ride on the back. She never learned to ride a bike. I think partly that was because she was a city kid, and also because she's not the most athletic, and just wasn't for her. So there's the best beach in New York City is really a bike ride is the best way to get there. It's about a bike ride away. It's a great day. It's about an hour bike ride, and then you spend this day on the beach. And it's situated in a place that's adjacent to another really well-known, popular beach with a massive parking lot. That was like a WPA project, I think, during the Great Depression. One of these, these federal projects to get people to work. They still have this kind of pre-war building. It's cool. It's kind of this deco building. That's, I guess the kind of like they have some food vendors and maybe bathrooms and stuff. Anyway, it's this massive beach. It's super deep. It's super wide, and hordes of people from Brooklyn and Queens go there. But just adjacent to it is this beach called Fort Tilden, which has some like government military property around it, hence the name. That's seemingly largely defunct. The buildings and the operation, it seems to be like a lot of kind of abandoned buildings that maybe were used at one time. I know they were used. My father-in-law was stationed down there at one point. But I think maybe the National Park Service uses some of it, but I don't think the military uses any of it. And because there's no parking near it, people don't go down there because it's just a super long schlep, to speak a little Yiddish when in Rome, eh? People aren't going to haul their kids and their coolers and their, many other beach accoutrements all the way down. So, but there is a little bit of a road and a little bit of a sidewalk, and you can bike way, way, way down so you can get away from the crowds. It's fantastic. I think I have talked about this. It's the nude beach that I've mentioned before. And anyway, it's a bike ride away. So I take Kate there. We went once. She rode on the bike in the back. I think it's probably, a little bit frightening to ride. I think she approached it with some trepidation when we first did it, but I'm very, very mindful of being very careful when she's on the back. And, we had fun. Anyway, boy, the sidebars are going tonight. We have this big e-bike, and it's a beast, and I ride it every day to work, but I mainly use the power, and because it's, keeps things pretty, in the morning I just kind of want to get there. I don't really want a big workout. I do pedal a little, just to get the body going. I had a medium one time tell me that I need to stay in my body, and that's why I like hockey so much, is because I really get into my body, get out of my head, and I definitely believe that, and I try to stay in my body as much as possible. So I do kind of move the pedals a little bit, but it's different than actually just biking like on a regular old bike. I had to do that. So the battery broke down on Thursday, and I had to ride my regular bike, which was fine, but I was a sweaty mess when I got to school, and that's uncomfortable. Thankfully I had to change of clothes, but it's kind of a pain to like change your whole set of clothes. So in any case, I had to get it fixed, and I've had this problem intermittently with the battery in the past, and I had put in a call to the shop that I bought it from. I was like, hey, look, the battery cuts out, and it's brand new, and it was, kind of expensive, and I was like, this isn't, and they're like, okay, it's not, they recognized pretty quickly that wasn't a good thing, and so turned out there was some kind of factory error. They needed to order some new part, yada, yada, yada. They ordered the part a while ago. I finally, I was supposed to go in, but then I had the foot injury, so I couldn't go in. So today, the foot was just starting to feel better this weekend. I kind of proved it last night by playing, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to try to go in. Well, the problem I had is that normally the problem used to be the battery would just cut out every once in a while. I could just take the battery off and put it back on, and I was fine. I could go for another 20 minutes or whatever, 10 minutes at least. But now the battery wasn't working at all, so I had to pedal this thing, and this thing is a beast. It's like 85, 90 pounds, big steel frame. It's mostly flat, but there is a big hill at one part in Prospect Park that I had to go through, and that was a challenge. I was, I had it in the easiest gear, and I was just pushing like the little engine that could. And I was just like one pedal at a time, one day at a time turned into one pedal at a time. And I kept saying, you can get off and push this thing if you have to, telling myself that. But I made it slowly up the hill. You know, I guess we can all take a metaphor from that. Sometimes you just got to keep going. I think Winston Churchill said, when you're in hell, keep going. Maybe not the most uplifting, but I've had that thought at various times, difficult times in my life. And, you know, there's something to it. And also knowing that this too shall pass, which I always associate with a grandma saying. Somebody told me their grandma used to say that to them, and it's lodged in my head. My grandmas didn't say that to me, but I'm going to take that. There's some grandma out there in the universe, in the spirit world, that's going to be whispering that to me. I'm going to adopt that grandma who's just telling me this too shall pass. So the combination of those two things. If you're in hell, keep going, and this too shall pass has been kind of a great combo for me, and one of my many in my set of affirmations that I like to work through the brain during difficult times. Anyway, I made it. It was a long slog, because even when you're in a situation like that, I learned this from rollerblading around the city. What seems like flat ground you can realize can actually have a little uphill grade, and you'll be very aware of what sections of road have a little uphill grade when you're rollerblading, or if you are biking a monster bike. And I did that, and I finally got to the shop. It probably was a 45-minute ride. And I was gassed when I got there. I jumped off the bike, though, and I was like immediately ebullient, as my dad would say. I was feeling great. I think I had a little bit of that runner's high. I hadn't done cardio really at all when my foot was hurt, because I just couldn't. I didn't want to put any pressure on it, and I didn't want to extend the injury. So I wasn't even biking for a long time. Wasn't pedaling I was just using the e-bike, using the power on the throttle. So I think that's part of it. Big cardio last night, and then big cardio today, and I was just had a little bit of that runner's high. I was just kind of bouncing around, chatting up the bike store guys like it was, we're all on Mardi Gras together. And across the street from the bike shop happened to be the location of the Brooklyn Smorgasbord, which I just realized before the show is pronounced Smorgasbord. It's a play on smorgasbord, the Scandinavian platter or meal, or platter and meal, where you have a variety of dishes. I've always loved the term smorgasbord. That's a little language corner, I guess. I love the sound of the word, and love the idea that you just have this grab bag is probably like an American kind of version of that. This sort of miscellaneous grouping, all sorts of different types of foods. And, it's, of course, when you're talking about food, that's more fun than an assortment, a random assortment, I guess, of something else, like maybe tools or I don't know, some other mundane thing. But so I found myself at Smorgasbord. I thought it was sort of serendipitous, another word my dad loves, because it was about the time when I have to eat. I eat this giant breakfast that I mentioned earlier every weekend, and my idea is that it's going to be brunch. It's going to be breakfast and lunch, and it's going to be actually two things. It's going to be tasty, but it's also going to be convenient, because then I won't have to worry about lunch as well. And I used to make this, and then I'd go play hockey, and then I'd come home, and I'd be like, okay, I'm just going to eat one more meal. And that worked for a while, but in the last few years, I found myself around 4 or 5 getting kind of crazily hungry. And I was like, I needed to eat something, and my blood sugar dips. And so I was at Smorgasbord, and that is a food festival kind of that they have weekly in Brooklyn. There's 2 spots. There's one close by me at the park in Prospect Park, and there's one up in Williamsburg, which is way far away. It's on the other end of Brooklyn. It's almost in Queens. And they have, 20, 25 food vendors, usually pretty they've got a good reputation. So I just walked around and it was fun. It was the first day. It's a seasonal thing. They do it in the spring, probably through the fall, but definitely not in the winter. And there was a buzz in the air. I think because people are excited for it to come back. You saw a bunch of foodies walking around. There was all sorts of different ethnic things. That's kind of the vibe of it. From all over the world, Venezuelan and Caribbean and Middle Eastern, and I don't think I saw African, but maybe some Asian stuff and some Indian stuff, the subcontinent, and a lot of it looked good. None of it looked that healthy. A lot of fried stuff, a lot of meat stuff. There was some vegetarian things. I just wasn't that hungry, so I didn't get anything. But I love the idea of Smorgasbord. I love that there is this like weekly festival, and you can just, if you're feeling like doing something different that involves food, which is always a great thing, you can hit it. So I just kind of did some window shopping, so to speak. I did think about getting a agua fresca. I usually have one or two a summer. I think I had one last summer. It's not really summer yet, but it's super good. You can get them from taco trucks too. So I was like, I just get it from the taco truck. It's very sweet. The agua fresca, at least from my local taco truck, but delicious. Kind of like, I don't know, not artificial sweet. Has more of a natural flavor. So I skipped it. But then I just walked around Williamsburg and I was just in a great mood. I think I was on this runner's high, and I was bouncing around, singing a little bit softly to myself and having myself a ball, just enjoying the free time. I did do a little window shopping at some thrift stores. I've kind of poked my head into thrift stores more in the last few years, or for maybe the last year. I used to do that a lot in college. It is kind of a tough game for a man. It's about 90% women's clothing in these spots. And I don't know, I don't know if they sort of declare it. I think with all the gender changes, in the last few years, I don't see these clear signs of men's department and women's department. And I don't know how to ask the question because it is confusing. And I don't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable. So I just kind of look around and get a sense of, what might be something that would fit me. Because that's the thing, is it does make a difference in terms of fit, right? If I'm at a rack that's basically women's larges, that's not going to fit me. So, and that's what the manufacturers, of course, went by back when many of these clothes were manufactured, this idea of either men's or women's. So it's tough. In any case, it's kind of tough because men, there's just a lot more for women, and it's New York City, especially in Williamsburg, it's expensive, even the vintage stuff, the used stuff. I saw a leather jacket for like $275. So it's a hard pill to swallow to pay for a jacket that, someone else wore for a long time. When I was doing this in Minneapolis in, the late 90s, early 2000s, stuff was dirt cheap, $10, $15, that kind of stuff. I'm sure there's some of that out in maybe far-flung areas, but not a lot in Williamsburg. But it's fun to look. I am looking for a leather jacket. I do think that's going to be a game changer for me. Let the press know this is coming down the pike, just so people can get ready. It's going to be a big event. You guys know. I mean, on par with the hats, perhaps. I used to have a faux leather jacket when I first moved to New York. When I first dated Kate, there's a certain style. It's hard to explain. It's like not a motorcycle jacket. That is one very distinct leather jacket that, has this classic look. I think it goes back to the 50s of this kind. I'm not looking at a picture of it, but you would know it immediately when you see it. There's kind of these straps, so I think maybe around the waist or around the cuffs. And I think it has kind of like a large angled lapel. I don't want that. I think those are kind of cool, but I just don't want that. I mean, it's a standard look. It's just not what I want. But I also don't want. There's all sorts of other styles, like the long 70s kind of leather trench or trench-like trench coat like. I don't want that. What I had was sort of athletic looking, but it didn't have epaulets, and I don't want a bomber with like a big furry collar. I kind of just want a standard one, but I want like a little bit of broken inness, and I don't want just like a straight, real sleek 90s kind of 90s look. So anyway, I'm picky. I'm very picky about everything that I want. I have a very clear idea of what I want whenever I think about fashion, which is good because I know exactly what I want, but it's difficult because it's, not easy to find, something so specific. But I tend to think these things that I want aren't that unique. And I think it's true of this kind of leather jacket. It's sort of like a bomber, I guess is the way I'd put it. And having a hard time finding one. Even eBay, of all places, I would thought, with eBay sort of feels like the internet to me of used clothes. And, you think it has access to anywhere that someone has the internet. But no dice so far. So anyway, my dear listeners, this is the new hunt. I think I'm pretty good in the hat department for a while, and we're on to a leather jacket. Am I too old to wear a leather jacket? I'm going to say no. I think a guy my age can pull it off. Am I too bespectacled? Perhaps that might be more the problem. I've got to find a way to do it right. I've got some ideas. I do have some ideas. They seem to be back in style now. Which is funny. That's going to get me into a little bit of the essays. This is going to be a long one. Bear with me. I got a few essays to read you. I hope it's okay, dear listener. It's been a while since I've posted. And we are going to do a few. I'm going to try to find some stuff that I think is kind of funny. We're keeping it kind of light. Smorgasbord light is going to be the theme of this episode. I couldn't find a theme that was, sort of, in my essays, I didn't have one clear theme. And so I thought Smorgasbord was perfect. And since I walked by Smorgasbord today, I thought, aha, that's a synchronicity that the universe is giving to me. Yeah, so speaking of what's in and what's not in and how I dress, I do love a bargain, also known as I'm cheap. And so I'm at Uniqlo a lot. I shop there, Japanese mega retailer who I just like their clothes. They're all simple, but they're great for certain staples, and they're good quality. They're like the best kind of, such a value is how they'd say it in the old days. In the 1900s, as the kids say about my childhood era. I have students that deride things as from the 1900s, which is amazing. Anyway, great value because for the price you get good stuff. Anyway, I shop there. Every once in a while I poke my head into H&M, and this stuff, those kind of companies are really geared towards young people, towards 20-somethings. And they are getting into baggy stuff. That's the thing. It's this kind of 90s look. It's just well documented now. It happened a few years ago. Really baggy. It's Gen Z folks. They like ripped jeans also, and flannels and kind of grungy stuff. And that's all kind of antithetical to my tastes. I really came of age at the end of the 90s, early 2000s, and that's when all this kind of tight-fitting 80s stuff came back. I never got into like the skin-tight jeans, but I did have a skinnier profile. I think all of my jeans and pants say skinny fit on them. And, there were a lot of dudes that were wearing like pleated dress pants and baggy suits when I was coming, when I was in my 20s. They were kind of like still stuck in this mid-90s thing. And I always thought, oh, it looks so bad. They look like they're just swimming in all this fabric, and it just looks so neat and hip and just kind of look put together. Everybody from like real hardcore hipsters in skin tight jeans, that maybe I didn't like, but anyone in like kind of tighter jeans, all the way to like a businessman that had a little more fitted look. Like I thought all that looked good. And I thought anything that was baggy looked really bad. And usually it was like with older middle-aged guys that just did not want to, they were not willing to make a switch. In any case, so now though I'm out in the cold. I heard this guy I like. He's got this show called Subway Takes on Instagram and TikTok. He's a total hipster, but he's about my age. And he was like, I some bit where he was making fun of his friend for having like skinny jeans and saying how like it's so out of style. And even Brad Pitt is wearing baggy things. And I was just like, I don't know. Seems kind of pathetic that a guy Brad Pitt's age is chasing after what the guys in their 20s are doing. I don't know. I think it's better you get to a certain age, and I think you gotta just lock in on your style, and maybe like not get way out of touch with the times, but I don't know, man. I don't think middle-aged dudes should be getting into stuff that the kids in their 20s and teens are into. So in any case, but I'm worried I'm going to start having to do that since I love a deal and I'm shopping at Uniqlo and H&M, and I'm just going to look like Gen Zer. I might have to grow a mustache just to put the looks together. That's another thing these guys do. My only hope now is that Gen Alpha will bring back skinnier pants and clean shaves. Well, no big deal. Just 10 more years of this. I want to talk a little bit about not needing a server's approval. I was at brunch. This was a while ago, actually, with some friends. My friends Dave and Jen. Shout out Dave and Jen. They were in town and we had brunch. And it's at this kind of like foodie place in Park Slope. So kind of hipstery, kind of trendy. I don't know. But the server was like, I gave her my order and she said, I love it. And I just thought, hell yeah, lady, thank you. Like, I'm so worried that you'd find my decision to get the skillet pancake a touch uninspired, if not downright unoriginal. I'm just thrilled that I didn't disappoint you. And frankly, I'm really relieved. So thank you. It makes, I love when she says I love it. Whoa. All right. I was just, thank you. We'll go over to the spirituality corner for just a minute. I'm going to talk a little bit about intuition. I do believe in following your intuition. I think I'm sort of like putting all of my chips into that idea because I can't analyze things anymore. There's too many data points in our society now. If you try to be a calculator, if you try to become a calculator and calculate your way through life, you'd soon be overwhelmed. You'd get an error message pop up from your brain. It's just too much. And so you've got to follow. Everyone, in fact, creates some kind of a framework through which they can try to make meaning of all of this information. I mean, we've always done that, I believe, as humans, but especially now, maybe especially now with so many like massive changes to, macro and, institutional and societal phenomena. But in any case, I do really believe this kind of comes from my spirituality and spiritual teachers that I like, but intuition, just like I really strongly believe in it. And I think that's been, when I'm truly listening, like has led me in the best directions, like kind of miraculous directions. If you looked at it from an odds point of view, how I left graduate school in my 20s with no work experience and found a person to work with that led to another job, I mean, that was my intuition. And that was, like the odds of that happening were infinitesimally small, and it happened. And it makes me just think that it happened for a reason. So, which brings me to my point, which is that when you follow your intuition, the odds are irrelevant. I like to remember that. The odds are irrelevant when you're following your intuition. Because it's taking you on the path I believe that you're supposed to be going on. It's not much easier said than done, and ye old brain over here gets going overtime when I'm into a situation where the world is telling me the odds are small, but I have to try to remind myself that it doesn't matter. It's not really, my path is my path, and it doesn't matter how many other people could do my path or how likely it is that other people are doing or anything along those lines. I'll talk a little bit about, go back to fashion a little bit, and about imposter syndrome. I have two basic looks when I'm not at work. Broadly speaking, I should say one of them is traditional, kind of a traditional, broadly speaking look with a touch of style, I like to think, and the other is more athletic. For the former, I think about like plaids and plaid button-ups and sweaters, dress pants, jeans and khakis, brown leather boots and fashion sneakers, classic jackets and overcoats. I try to keep neutrals together and incorporate a lot of pattern and jewel tone color. I wear my broad-brimmed boater and bolero hats with these outfits. For the latter, it's pretty straightforward. The athletic part, that's like hoodies and athletic pants and athletic jackets and sneakers and baseball caps and beanies. There's a lot of synthetic material and a fair amount of solid colors with not a lot of pattern. I also have team logos and various graphics on this side of my wardrobe. I try to keep things pretty fitted in this department too. I do that, I guess I should have said, in the former, in the more traditional look. And I try to coordinate colors. I think a lot of men have a similar division, but I think my traditional side is a little bit more hipster than both. Probably true. Sometimes it makes me feel like I have a bit of a split personality, a jock at one moment and a sort of art fan / hipster the next. Sometimes I reflect on these styles and on the real aspects of my personality and my past they represent, and it makes me wonder about who I am. After living a life of a jock through most of my childhood, I started to tip towards the artsy side in high school. By the end of my sophomore year, I leapt decisively with both feet, by the end of my sophomore year of college, I leapt decisively with both feet, deciding that the social scene at my college and cultural and intellectual legitimacy demanded it. I almost entirely stopped watching sports, playing them, and having anything to do with my old friends from that world. After I moved to New York and left graduate philosophy studies, I started to shift back into the mainstream and the sports world once again. By the time I started working in the corporate world at age 27, I was very much back in the center of our culture. Once, a hockey friend who worked in a more creative field than the vast majority of my hockey friends saw me in a very wide-brimmed hat and laughed. That and other non-enthusiastic responses to the hat made me self-conscious about this artsy side of my fashion and maybe the side of myself. Maybe I wasn't so savvy with fashion, and maybe I shouldn't be dressing this way. I'd point to artists and even hipster athletes in similar hats. Beck, Bob Dylan, a Stanley Cup champion goalie, Braden Holtby. But then I'd think they'd very clearly succeeded, and perhaps I hadn't. It made me wonder about my creativity. Was I really just a jock whose career ending spun him into a desperate search for some other validation? What had I done creatively? Wasn't philosophy more about analysis? Was I really going to claim that my playmaking at hockey or even problem solving in a corporate project management role were expressions of creativity? Was podcasting creative or just me spouting out my random thoughts? Even if it was creative, was it any good? Undoubtedly, most creative people have similar doubts, but knowing that didn't make them less pressing. Whenever I get to this place, I think about creative people who have taken shit before. God knows they are legion. I think especially about those that have been particularly dismissed, even by other creatives, graffiti artists, rappers who have sampled other music, and podcasters often decried as people just talking about random stuff. When I think about these creatives, I imagine moments of their self-doubt, and I want to tell them, keep going. Fuck the noise. As I do, I tell myself there's no reason not to tell myself the exact same thing. Okay, that's a little bit about fashion and I guess spirituality a bit. Talk a little bit about vocab. I started thinking about romantic comedies in the 90s or maybe the early 2000s. Often there'd be a man, a real slick man, and many times they'd have him speak a foreign language, usually a European one. He would often also be what they would term a gourmet cook. And Diane, he's a gourmet cook. The shrimp scampi was just divine. Sidebar to the language corner, we don't use the word gourmet anymore. People are foodies now, and restaurants are chef-driven or described by their Michelin stars. Poor gourmet. Well, back to my point. I was thinking about how I'm not a gourmet cook and how I really don't like these buzzy restaurants and their tasting menus. Kate and I really differ here. I like traditional food and do like different national cuisines, but I like the regular versions of them. For the tasting menu experience, we go to a buzzy restaurant. We're served all kinds of foams and sprigs and some kind of inventions. Kate also doesn't eat a number of common foods like bananas, berries, apples, or oranges. She doesn't much care for burgers or regular pizza. I used to call her a food snob, but it's gotten so bad that I've downgraded her to a food terrorist. I don't know quite what is driving this, but the phrase contrarian hipsterism comes to mind. Then I thought, I'm glad I know the word contrarian, and maybe I should use this moment to try to sell my students on vocabulary. I'll tell them it can be really helpful to know all sorts of words when you're trying to formulate a really apt insult to your future significant other. Okay. All right, I'll give you one more. This is earmuff time for if you have any kids in the car or you're just a little bit, what's the word? If you don't like the blue stuff, if you don't like the, the more risque comedy, you can turn me off now. But, all right, fair warning. Here we go. Young Mormons, in an effort to satisfy their libidinous urges, yet remain within the church's restrictions on premarital sex, engage in an act called soaking. This involves, incredibly, the mere insertion of the penis into the vagina, sans the very nearly universal complement of thrusting. Apparently, given the name of the act, it also involves bodily fluids. Additionally, some of these youngsters employ even more ingenuity and have a friend provide a helping hand by pushing the back of one of the participants. I must say, when they have finally got to breeding, they breed quite the class of lawyers over there. I love how they must envision their relationship with God as a child. Well, Your Honor, as we have shown here, in every major dictionary, the definition of sexual intercourse has made reference to a thrusting motion of some type by the participants, and we have seen and heard from all accounts that there is no thrusting happening. Dare we say, Lord God on Most High, if there is no thrust, acquit you must. And then God would grumpily and reluctantly say something like, well, let the record show I don't like it. I don't like it one bit. But as counsel points out, and I read the law, you have in fact not sinned. All right, that's it for this week. I will be back with interviews soon. I hope everyone's doing well. Peace and love.